Bullies laugh at poor girl, not knowing she's a rich heiress, a shocking twist. Before we begin the story, please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The morning air at Harvard Prep Academy was thick with excitement as the first week of school continued. Lily rode her bicycle each day, carefully avoiding the sleek cars of her classmates. But no matter how hard she tried to stay under the radar, Sophie Blackwell and her clique seemed to have their eyes on her from the moment she arrived. Sophie, who lived for attention, didn't waste a second trying to make Lily's quiet life a little more complicated. By the third day of school, Sophie had made up her mind. Lily, the bike girl with the simple clothes, was an easy target. She was different. And in Sophie's world, being different was a weakness. Sophie, ever the queen bee, made sure to make Lily feel small in every possible way. It started with the whispers. At lunch, as Lily quietly sat with a book, Sophie strutted by with her designer purse swinging from her shoulder. "I hear she's just a scholarship kid," Sophie said loud enough for those nearby to hear, turning to her friends with a smirk. "Must be hard for someone like her to fit in here, huh?" The group giggled, but Lily didn't flinch. She'd heard worse over the years, people who assumed they knew her because of her last name, or because of how her father's wealth was paraded in the media. She refused to let it affect her. Sophie's words, though sharp, bounced off her like water off a duck's back. It didn't matter that they thought she was poor. She knew who she was, and that was enough for her. But Sophie wasn't done. Every chance she got, she made sure to throw jabs at Lily's modest appearance. In the hallways, she'd call out, "Hey, bike girl. Did you lock your bicycle up okay? Or do you need a bus pass to get home?" Lily's heart tightened each time, but her expression never changed. She would smile softly and nod, responding with kindness. "I'm good, thanks, Sophie." And then she'd keep walking. Every encounter felt like a test of patience, and though the whispers stung, they didn't shake her. But Sophie wasn't the only one watching. As the days went on, other students started to take notice of Lily's calm demeanor. Alex Monroe, a popular and intelligent student from one of the wealthiest families at the school, had been watching from the sidelines. He wasn't like the others. He didn't enjoy mocking people for their differences. Unlike his peers, Alex didn't flaunt his wealth or bask in the attention of others. He was the type of person who valued substance over status. One day, during lunch, Sophie was in the middle of making another sarcastic remark about Lily, this time louder than ever. "I guess we'll see how long she lasts before she can't afford to stay here," Sophie said, looking over at Lily. The table erupted in laughter. But before Lily could even react, Alex's voice rang out across the cafeteria. "Is that all you do, Sophie? Talk about people who aren't even bothering you?" Sophie froze. The whole cafeteria went silent as the attention shifted from Lily to Alex. He stood up, his voice calm but firm. "Leave her alone. You're obsessed with tearing people down just to feel better about yourself." Sophie's mouth hung open, her eyes narrowing with anger. She tried to brush it off with a laugh. "Oh, please, Alex. She's the one who can't fit in here. Don't pretend you care about her." Alex shook his head, his gaze never leaving Sophie. "I don't care about you, Sophie, but I care about respect. Something you clearly don't understand." With that, Alex walked over to Lily's table and sat down. The room was still. Everyone was watching. The whispers began again, but this time, they weren't about Lily. They were about Alex. "Hey, Emily, do you mind if I sit with you?" he asked, his voice friendly. Lily looked up, surprised, but smiled and nodded. "Of course, Alex. Thanks for sitting with me." For the first time in a long while, Lily felt like she could breathe. In that one small gesture, Alex had shown her something she didn't expect: compassion. In the sea of judgment, his presence was a quiet reassurance that maybe, just maybe, there were people who saw her for who she truly was, not the rumors or assumptions others made about her. As the lunch period continued, Sophie stared across the room at the two of them. Her jealousy burned. How could Alex Monroe, the most popular boy in school, sit with her? Lily was nothing special. Sophie had seen the way the other students whispered about her. They all thought Lily was just some scholarship kid, struggling to fit into the world of privilege that was Harvard prep. Yet here she was, sitting with the boy who everyone adored. The rest of the day was a mix of quiet glares and hushed conversations. Sophie's attempts to make Lily feel small were beginning to lose their power. Every time she threw a comment or a jab, Lily simply responded with kindness and a calm demeanor. It was clear to Alex, and to others who were paying attention, that Lily wasn't bothered by the games Sophie played. She was in control, in her own quiet way. But Sophie wasn't about to give up. The whispers continued, and with each passing day, her desire to see Lily crumble grew stronger. She would stop at nothing to ensure that the quiet girl would never overshadow her in the school's social hierarchy. And so, the battle began, not just between Lily and Sophie, but between kindness and cruelty, between authenticity and pretense. Sophie had made it her mission to break Lily. But what she didn't know was that Lily Carter wasn't like the other girls she had tried to tear down in the past. Lily had the strength to endure, and the wisdom to rise above it all. The days at Harvard Prep Academy began to blur together as Lily continued to maintain her low profile despite Sophie Blackwell's relentless teasing. Sophie, however, wasn't about to let up. If anything, her determination to undermine Lily only grew stronger as she realized the quiet girl wasn't crumbling under the pressure. To Sophie, that was an insult. How dare someone like Lily, with her plain clothes and simple bicycle, show more strength than she ever had? It wasn't long before Sophie found new ways to make Lily feel uncomfortable. It started with little things, snide comments, dismissive remarks in the hallways. But then, Sophie escalated. One afternoon, just as the school bell rang to signal the end of the day, Sophie cornered Lily near the lockers. "Hey, bike girl," Sophie called out in a voice so loud it echoed off the walls. "How's the scholarship life treating you? You must be really lucky to even be here. Must be nice to ride your bike to school while we're all in cars." Lily, who had been packing her books into her bag, didn't even look up. She had learned long ago that ignoring people like Sophie was the best way to handle them, but Sophie wasn't going to let it slide so easily. She stepped closer, blocking Lily's path. I said, "How's it feel to be the charity case here?" Sophie's voice was thick with malice. Lily finally looked up, her eyes calm and steady. "Sophie, if you want to talk about something, I'd be happy to listen. But if you're just here to talk about me behind my back, I don't have time for it." The words were polite, almost kind. But there was an edge to them that Sophie hadn't expected. It was as if Lily was daring her to continue, but at the same time challenging her to grow up. Sophie recoiled, thrown off by Lily's composure. She had been expecting the usual reaction: anger, tears, frustration. But instead, Lily stood firm. It was a moment of vulnerability for Sophie, and for the first time, she was unsure of herself. The tension hung in the air for a long moment, before Sophie snapped back into her usual arrogant stance. "Whatever," Sophie muttered, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "Don't think that you're fooling anyone. You may have them all fooled, but not me. I know who you really are." With a final sneer, Sophie stormed off, leaving Lily standing there, the sting of the words still lingering in the air. The very next day, Sophie launched her most daring attack yet. It was during lunch, and the cafeteria was buzzing with conversation. Sophie, as always, had gathered her group of friends around her, regaling them with stories of her latest shopping spree and the amazing dinner she'd had at an exclusive restaurant. But this time, Sophie had a different agenda. As Lily walked into the cafeteria, Sophie's voice rang out louder than ever before. "Hey, look, it's the bike girl. Or should I say, the scholarship queen." Sophie's words were accompanied by the laughter of her clique, and the other students nearby began to turn their attention toward Lily. Lily didn't stop walking. She didn't even flinch. But as she passed Sophie's table, she noticed Alex Monroe, the most popular guy at school, sitting at the edge, his eyes fixed on her. "That's enough, Sophie," Alex said, his voice sharp. "You've had your fun. Leave her alone." Sophie's face reddened with anger. How dare Alex speak to her like that in front of everyone? She had worked hard to build her reputation, and now this bike girl was stealing the attention. Sophie's jealousy was beginning to bubble over, and she couldn't control it anymore. Lily, sensing the shift in the room, turned to Alex and offered him a soft smile, the kind of smile that made Alex feel something he couldn't quite explain. It wasn't one of gratitude. It was a smile of quiet strength, the kind that made him want to be near her. For the rest of the lunch period, the air in the cafeteria was thick with whispers. Sophie tried to continue with her usual banter, but she couldn't help but notice how many students were now looking at Lily with admiration. It was as though the rumors and jabs Sophie had worked so hard to plant were beginning to unravel. After lunch, as the students filed out of the cafeteria, Alex caught up with Lily. "Hey," he said, walking beside her. "Are you okay?" Lily smiled, her expression soft. "I'm fine, really. I've had worse." Alex, now genuinely curious, asked, "Why don't you stand up to her?" "Why let her keep getting away with it?" Lily paused for a moment, thinking. "Because, Alex, she's not really trying to hurt me. She's just hurting herself. People like Sophie, they only tear others down because they can't see the value in themselves. The only way to deal with that kind of person is to let them expose themselves." Alex frowned, his curiosity piqued by Lily's calm demeanor. "I don't think I could handle it the way you do." Lily's eyes softened. "That's the thing, Alex. You don't have to. You just need to remember that their words don't define you. You define you." Alex was silent for a long moment, processing her words. He had never heard anyone talk about Sophie like this before. For most of the school year, he had watched as Sophie manipulated people and flaunted her power. But in that moment, Lily made him see something he hadn't before. Sophie's wealth and popularity were nothing more than a shield for her insecurities. And Lily, despite her quiet demeanor, was the one who had the true power. The next few days felt like a shift in the atmosphere at Harvard Prep. Sophie, noticing the growing attention toward Lily, began to feel more isolated. No matter how many times she tried to make Lily the target of her taunts, it only seemed to backfire. The whispers about Lily's grace and composure spread, and slowly but surely, the students started to see through Sophie's carefully crafted persona. But Sophie wasn't going to back down. If anything, she was more determined than ever to break Lily. She would show the entire school that Lily wasn't the quiet, unbothered girl she appeared to be. Sophie wasn't finished yet, and as much as Lily remained calm and composed, the battle between them was far from over. The atmosphere at Harvard Prep Academy was electric as the school's annual charity gala approached. The students had been talking about it for weeks. This was their chance to shine, to prove not only their wealth, but their generosity. The event would be a spectacle, a place where power and influence were displayed openly, and it was clear to everyone that Sophie Blackwell intended to steal the spotlight. Sophie's plan was simple: make the largest donation of the night. $500,000 was her target. It was a number that would guarantee her the admiration and attention she craved. Sophie was prepared to be the star, to bask in the spotlight that she had spent years cultivating. The gala was a chance for her to prove once again that no one could rival her status at Harvard Prep. On the night of the event, the ballroom gleamed with elegance. Students dressed in their finest attire, surrounded by parents, teachers, and alumni. The room was buzzing with conversation, the faint sound of glasses clinking, and the soft hum of sophisticated music in the background. Sophie, in her signature red gown, stood in the center of it all, exuding confidence as she navigated through the crowd with her friends Vanessa and James. When it was her turn, Sophie walked up to the stage, a microphone in hand, her head held high. The room quieted as she made her announcement. "Tonight, I am proud to donate $500,000 to the Harvard Prep Scholarship Fund," Sophie declared, her voice steady and full of authority. The applause that followed was immediate and deafening. Sophie basked in the approval, her heart swelling with pride as she absorbed the admiration of everyone in the room. This was her moment, the moment she had been waiting for. There was no way anyone could overshadow her now. Vanessa leaned in close to her. "You're amazing, Sophie. No one could ever top that." James nodded, equally impressed. "No one will forget this night." Sophie smiled, but there was a hint of uncertainty that lingered in the back of her mind. She had given a substantial donation, but she was aware of the quiet girl, Lily Carter, sitting in the corner, watching with her calm and composed demeanor. Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that Lily's presence was a reminder of something more. Something that, despite her wealth, Sophie couldn't quite put her finger on. It was then that the unexpected happened. Lily stood up from her seat, her face a picture of quiet determination. As the room's attention shifted toward her, the whispers began. Lily Carter, the quiet, simple girl with a bicycle instead of a sports car, was standing up to make her announcement. She walked to the stage without hesitation, her movements graceful and steady. The spotlight followed her as she took the microphone from the podium. For a brief moment, the room fell silent, unsure of what to expect. Was she going to make a donation? Would she match Sophie's $500,000? Lily's voice was calm, almost soft, yet it carried clearly across the room. "I'd like to donate $1,000 to the Harvard Prep Scholarship Fund," she said, her words hanging in the air like a powerful statement. A stunned silence followed. Students exchanged confused looks. Some even gasped, unsure if they had heard her correctly. The number was staggering, $1,000, a sum that dwarfed Sophie's donation. How could Lily, the quiet girl with the simple attire, possibly afford such a donation? The murmurs began, whispers circulating through the crowd as people tried to make sense of the situation. Sophie's face turned pale, the smile she had been wearing suddenly vanishing. She looked over at Lily, who stood poised and collected, her expression serene. It was as if Sophie had just been knocked off her pedestal. The applause came slowly at first, unsure, tentative. But then, the room erupted into a chorus of approval. The students, once enthralled by Sophie's display of wealth, now found themselves in awe of Lily's quiet generosity. $1,000. Not only was it a larger donation than Sophie's, but it also carried with it a sense of genuine sincerity that Sophie's performance lacked. Sophie's stomach twisted with jealousy as she watched Lily stand tall, the room's attention now on her. She had wanted to be the center of it all, and now Lily had stolen that spotlight from her, effortlessly. Sophie had played her hand, and Lily had raised the stakes beyond what Sophie could have ever imagined. As the night went on, the dynamic in the room had completely shifted. Sophie tried to recover, laughing and making small talk with her group of friends. But the energy around her had changed. The whispers about Lily's donation spread like wildfire, and for the first time, Sophie was no longer the focus of the event. She had been eclipsed by the quiet girl who had always seemed so out of place. Sophie, frustrated and humiliated, stood off to the side, watching as the students flocked to Lily, congratulating her on her remarkable donation. Lily, however, remained humble, her expression calm as ever. She wasn't here to compete. She wasn't here to outshine anyone. She had simply done what she felt was right. Later that evening, as the gala came to an end and the students began to file out, Alex Monroe approached Lily. His expression was warm, but there was a spark of admiration in his eyes that Lily hadn't noticed before. "You were incredible tonight," Alex said, his voice filled with genuine respect. I don't think anyone expected that. You showed them all something they'll never forget. Lily smiled softly, her eyes meeting his. I just wanted to do something meaningful. It's not about the attention. It's about the cause. Alex nodded, understanding. You've got a strength about you, Lily. I admire that. You're not just another pretty face here for the social scene. You're someone who's really making a difference. Lily's smile widened just a little. Thank you, Alex. That means more to me than you know. As the night ended, the students filed out, but Sophie was nowhere to be seen. She had retreated to the shadows, her pride shattered. Lily's quiet generosity had upstaged her, and now Sophie was left with nothing but the bitter taste of jealousy and defeat. The morning after the charity gala, the energy at Harvard Prep Academy was different. There was an undercurrent of excitement in the air, but it wasn't because of the usual gossip about designer clothes or extravagant parties. The students were talking about Lily Carter, the girl who had just donated $1,000, a sum so large it had knocked Sophie Blackwell from her throne. Sophie, the queen bee, had always controlled the narrative at Harvard Prep. But now, as the students gathered in the hallways, the whispers were all about Lily and her stunning, selfless donation. Sophie's reputation, once built on power and influence, was beginning to crumble. The whispers about Lily's generosity were loud and clear. $1,000, no strings attached. It was a true act of kindness. In comparison, Sophie's flashy performance, her staged, attention-grabbing donation of $500,000, suddenly felt shallow. Sophie had been the center of attention for years, and now it felt like the entire school was slowly turning away from her. Her friends, once eager to bask in her glow, were now eyeing Lily with a mix of admiration and curiosity. Vanessa and James, her closest allies, had always been her biggest cheerleaders. But this time, their praise for Sophie felt less enthusiastic. At lunch, the following day, Sophie sat with her group of friends, but she felt the growing distance between her and them. The usual admiration that she used to receive was replaced with polite conversation and the occasional glance toward Lily, who sat at a table across the room, quietly enjoying her meal. It wasn't just the students who were talking. Teachers had begun to notice, too. Her donation had become the talk of the school, and not for the reasons Sophie had hoped. "Sophie, that donation you made last night," Vanessa started, her voice faltering as she broke the silence. Sophie looked up from her phone, raising an eyebrow. "What about it?" she snapped, though she knew exactly what was coming. "Well, it was impressive," Vanessa continued, trying to tread carefully. "But Lily's donation, $1,000. That's incredible. No one expected it, not even Sophie Blackwell." Sophie's jaw clenched. "Don't start, Vanessa," she snapped. "I know what you're trying to say, but we all know how it works. Her dad probably paid for it. Or maybe she just wanted attention. She's always trying to act like she's better than us." James, who had been silent up until now, cleared his throat. "But Sophie," he said softly, "Lily doesn't seem to care about the attention. She doesn't act like, well, like us." Sophie's gaze shot toward him, her eyes narrowing. "What are you trying to say, James?" "Nothing," he quickly muttered, realizing his mistake. But the seed had already been planted. Sophie could feel the shift. Her friends were starting to question her. Her throne, built on wealth and status, was beginning to crack. The tension reached its peak the next day in the school courtyard. The students were gathering for lunch, and as usual, Sophie was surrounded by her entourage, discussing the latest trends and gossip. But today, something felt off. When Sophie glanced toward the entrance of the cafeteria, her eyes locked with Alex Monroe, who was walking in with Lily by his side. Alex, once her admirer, had been spending more and more time with Lily lately. They were always talking, laughing, and it was clear that Alex was beginning to see something in Lily that Sophie couldn't. Sophie's stomach churned with jealousy. She had always been the one to command attention, but now, here was Lily, quiet, humble, and unassuming, taking the spotlight in a way that Sophie never could. Lily, however, didn't seem to notice the looks. She was as calm and composed as ever, offering a gentle smile to her friends. It was the same smile that had disarmed Sophie the night before, the same smile that had won over the entire school with nothing more than an act of generosity. It was as if Lily didn't even need to try. Sophie couldn't stand it. She had worked so hard to build her reputation, to be the center of it all. And now, everything she had built was crumbling. As the group sat down to eat, Sophie found herself in a rare moment of silence. Alex leaned in to speak with Lily, his attention fully on her. His focus was clear, his admiration obvious. He seemed genuinely interested in what Lily had to say, and Sophie couldn't help but feel a pang of insecurity. Later that afternoon, after the school day ended, Sophie walked the halls with Vanessa and James. She was fuming, trying to contain the growing storm inside her. She had spent the entire day playing it cool, but now she couldn't hold it in anymore. "I can't believe her," Sophie spat, her voice low but sharp. "Lily Carter. She's stealing everything from me. First, she takes the attention at the gala, and now she has Alex wrapped around her finger." Vanessa frowned, glancing at James before responding. "Sophie, it's not like that." "Alex, I don't want to hear it," Sophie snapped. "I've spent years building this place up, and now Lily's just waltzing in, acting like she owns the place. She doesn't belong here." "None of us do." James shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe she belongs here more than you think," he muttered, more to himself than to Sophie. The words hit Sophie harder than she anticipated. "Maybe she belongs here more than you think." They echoed in her head as she stormed out of the hallway and into the school courtyard. She had worked so hard to be the queen of Harvard Prep, to hold everyone's attention. But now, with Lily standing tall in her quiet, unshakable way, Sophie was starting to feel like an outsider in her own life. She wasn't going to let this go. Not now, not ever. If Lily thought she could waltz into Sophie's world and take everything Sophie had worked for, she was sorely mistaken. The days following the charity gala seemed to stretch on forever for Sophie Blackwell. Her once solid grip on the throne of Harvard Prep Academy was slipping, and with each passing day, she felt more and more like an outsider in a world she had built for herself. Students who once gravitated toward her were now avoiding her, or worse, were starting to look at her with the same coldness that she had once reserved for people like Lily Carter. The whispers in the hallways had changed. Now, instead of hearing her name spoken with admiration, Sophie heard it in hushed tones, followed by giggles and uncertain glances. It wasn't just the donation. It wasn't even Alex's growing interest in Lily. It was the way everyone seemed to be looking at Lily as if she were the real star. Sophie couldn't escape the gnawing feeling in her gut, that the quiet, unassuming girl she had tried to tear down had somehow become the most powerful person at Harvard Prep. And it scared Sophie more than she cared to admit. But Sophie wasn't about to let it go. She wasn't going to let Lily take everything from her, even if it meant fighting dirty. The truth was, Sophie wasn't used to losing. She wasn't used to feeling weak. And she was angry. It was during lunch a few days later that Sophie made her move. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual energy, but Sophie's mind was far from the light-hearted conversations happening around her. She had been quietly watching Lily from across the room. Alex was talking to her again, his attention fully on Lily as usual. The two of them laughed together, the chemistry between them undeniable. Sophie clenched her fists under the table. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, her anger simmering to the surface. Without thinking, Sophie stood up abruptly and walked over to Lily's table. Her friends, Vanessa and James, exchanged uncertain glances. But Sophie didn't care. She was beyond reasoning now. Her jealousy had taken over, and she was ready to destroy the girl who had done nothing but show kindness and generosity. "Lily," Sophie said, her voice dripping with venom, loud enough for the students nearby to hear. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'll tell you one thing. You'll never fit in here. You may have bought some temporary attention with your big donation, but you're still an outsider. Lily's eyes locked with Sophie's, unshaken. She didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she looked at her with that calm, steady gaze that made Sophie feel like she was the one being scrutinized. I don't need to fit in, Sophie, Lily replied, her voice cool and collected. I'm here to learn and to be myself. I don't need to impress anyone. I'm not trying to take your place. You've done that just fine on your own. Sophie's jaw tightened, her grip on the edge of the table turning her knuckles white. How dare Lily, the girl she had humiliated, stand there with such grace? Sophie had expected a reaction, a tear, an apology, something that showed weakness. But Lily's calmness only fueled Sophie's anger. You think you're so much better than everyone else? Sophie hissed, her voice rising. You think because you have $1 million donation you can waltz in and steal everything from me? You're just a charity case pretending to be something you're not. The room fell silent. Students nearby turned to look at the two girls, whispers beginning to spread like wildfire. Lily's face remained unreadable, but Sophie could see the faintest twitch at the corner of her mouth, as if she were holding back laughter. You don't get it, do you, Sophie? Lily's voice was low, but there was an edge to it now. I don't want your position. I never did. I don't need to tear you down to lift myself up. You're the one who's been chasing an image your whole life. And I don't have time for that. Sophie's eyes blazed with fury. How dare Lily say those things in front of everyone? This was her school, her kingdom. And Lily was coming here, with her quiet demeanor and her perfect donations, like she was some kind of saint. Well, you better get used to it, because I'm not backing down, Sophie spat, her eyes narrowing. I won't let you take what's mine. The words stung, but Lily didn't back down. Instead, she stood tall, her expression a mix of pity and understanding. You're the one who's in the wrong, Sophie, she said, shaking her head slightly. You don't have to keep pretending. Not everyone is after your throne. Sophie's anger flared. She turned on her heels and stormed out of the cafeteria, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the eyes of her classmates on her, but she refused to look back. She needed to leave. The humiliation was too much. She had tried to break Lily, but it seemed like it was Sophie who had broken. Later that afternoon, as Sophie sat in her room at home, her phone buzzed with a new notification. She picked it up and saw a message from Vanessa. Everyone's talking about you and Lily. I heard the rumors. People are saying Lily's the real deal now. Everyone's starting to admire her. Sophie's blood boiled as she stared at the message. Her mind raced with thoughts of how she could fix this, how she could get everything back. She wasn't ready to give up her place, her position. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that no matter what she did, Lily was already winning. The following week, Sophie came to school with a new plan. She had to win. She had to prove to everyone that she was the one who deserved their admiration. She was determined to show them all that Lily was nothing but an illusion, a girl who didn't belong. But things didn't go according to plan. As Sophie watched Lily and Alex continue to grow closer, her jealousy turned to something deeper. She had lost control of everything she thought she had built. The students no longer looked at her with awe. Instead, they whispered about Lily's quiet power, about how she was the real heiress, the true star. The truth was finally sinking in for Sophie. Lily Carter had already won, and no amount of petty manipulation or desperate scheming could take that away from her. Sophie had always prided herself on being the star of Harvard Prep Academy. For years she had lived for the attention, for the whispers of admiration in the hallways, the envious glances of her peers. But now, every day that passed felt like a struggle to hold on to something that was slipping from her grasp. Despite her efforts to regain control, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing the battle. Sophie's once coveted place at the center of the school was now occupied by Lily Carter, the quiet, humble girl who had quietly swept the entire school off its feet with her kindness, grace, and, as it turned out, her $1,000 donation to the Harvard Prep Scholarship Fund. Sophie had tried everything, making snide remarks, organizing parties, throwing her weight around, but nothing seemed to stick anymore. The more she tried to drag Lily down, the more the students rallied around her. Even Alex Monroe, the one person Sophie had hoped would always be on her side, had started to see Lily in a new light. And that hurt. It stung more than Sophie cared to admit. Alex, her Alex, the one who had always admired her, was now spending more and more time with Lily. They'd become inseparable. What started as casual conversations had evolved into something deeper, something Sophie couldn't ignore. Sophie watched them from across the cafeteria one afternoon. Lily and Alex were sitting together, their heads bent close as they whispered and laughed. It was the kind of connection that Sophie had once imagined would be hers, but now she realized she was watching it slip away. She gritted her teeth, trying to push down the rising tide of jealousy that threatened to engulf her. But no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, the feeling lingered, festering like an open wound. Sophie had always been the one to stand out in a room, the one people gravitated toward. Now, Lily's quiet, unassuming presence was becoming the focus of everyone's attention, and Sophie hated it. The turning point came when Sophie overheard a conversation in the hallway that would change everything. "I just can't believe it," one of the girls from Sophie's former inner circle said, her voice filled with awe. "Lily Carter, she's like a breath of fresh air. She's not like the rest of us, you know. She's so real." Sophie froze in her tracks, the words hitting her harder than she expected. Real. That was what Lily had become to everyone, a symbol of authenticity, of someone who didn't need to put on an act to fit in. The girl who had once been the school's queen bee was now nothing more than a faint memory, slowly fading in the shadow of someone who had come to embody everything Sophie had pretended to be. Another girl chimed in. "I've never seen anyone handle all the pressure like she does. She doesn't let anything get to her." "Sophie? She's always chasing after something, but Lily, she's content. She's just herself." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard anyone speak of her like that. Like she was the one who was lost, the one who was pretending, while Lily was real. The weight of those words hit her with the force of a sledgehammer. That evening, as Sophie lay in her bed, staring up at the ceiling, everything finally clicked. She had spent so long trying to fit a mold that wasn't hers, trying to control her world with money, status, and power. She had sacrificed her integrity, her friendships, even her sense of self, all in the name of maintaining a position that now seemed empty and hollow. Meanwhile, Lily Carter had done nothing but stay true to herself. She wasn't chasing anything. She wasn't pretending. She was simply existing in a way that Sophie could never seem to do. The jealousy burned within her. But there was something else too, an unsettling realization. Sophie had spent years building her kingdom, but it was all built on a fragile foundation. The moment Lily stepped into her world, that foundation cracked. It wasn't just about the money or the popularity. It was about something Sophie couldn't control. Lily's genuine spirit, her authenticity, her ability to make others feel like they mattered. For the first time in her life, Sophie questioned everything. Who was she without the glitter and the wealth? Who was she without the image she had so carefully cultivated? The next day, as Harvard Prep Academy buzzed with the excitement of an upcoming school trip, Sophie made a decision. She couldn't go on like this, pretending to be something she wasn't. The bitterness, the jealousy, it was starting to consume her. And deep down, she knew she didn't want to be that person anymore. She found Lily outside near the school's courtyard, sitting alone on a bench, reading a book. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the campus. For a moment, Sophie just stood there, watching Lily, before she took a deep breath and walked over to her. Lily looked up as Sophie approached, her face softening with surprise. "Sophie?" she asked, almost as if she hadn't expected the confrontation. Sophie hesitated, her thoughts racing. But then she spoke the words she had been holding in for so long. I'm sorry, Lily. I've been terrible to you. I don't know what came over me." Sophie's voice was quieter than usual, almost fragile. She had never shown vulnerability like this before. Lily studied her for a moment, her eyes full of curiosity. Sophie couldn't help but notice how calm she looked, how unshaken she always seemed, even in the face of Sophie's cruelty. "You don't have to apologize," Lily said, her voice gentle, "but I appreciate it." "It's not about winning, Sophie. It's about being kind. It's about treating people with respect." Sophie swallowed hard. "I've spent my whole life trying to prove something, trying to be something I'm not. I thought it was about power, about being at the top. But now I see it was all a lie. I don't know who I am without all of it." Lily's expression softened even more. "You don't have to have all the answers. It's okay to just be yourself." "You're enough, Sophie. You don't need to pretend to be perfect. You just need to be kind." That's where true strength lies. The words felt like a weight being lifted from Sophie's shoulders. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe again. Sophie didn't know where things would go from here, or if Lily would ever fully forgive her. But standing there in the soft glow of the setting sun, Sophie realized one thing for sure. The battle was over. Lily Carter had won, not because of the money, not because of the attention, but because she had something that Sophie had spent her whole life searching for: peace, authenticity, and the ability to stay true to herself. And for the first time in her life, Sophie was beginning to understand what that felt like. The days that followed were like a quiet storm for Sophie Blackwell. The tension in her chest had eased slightly, but the weight of her actions, her jealousy, and the growing respect she had for Lily Carter continued to weigh heavily on her heart. She found herself questioning every decision, every moment of arrogance that had shaped her into the person she had become. It was as if the veil had lifted, and now she was forced to face the reality of what she had been. Sophie spent the next few days in quiet reflection. She still couldn't shake the image of Lily's calm face as she spoke those simple yet powerful words. "You don't need to pretend to be perfect. You just need to be kind." Sophie had spent so much of her life trying to be perfect, trying to be the best, that she had lost sight of the fact that it wasn't about the chase. It was about the journey. She still didn't know where she fit in anymore. The familiar walls of Harvard prep that had once felt so comfortable now seemed suffocating. The glitter, the status, the constant battle for attention, it all felt so irrelevant now. Sophie wasn't sure who she was without the crown, but she knew she didn't want to keep fighting for something that left her empty. It was during a late afternoon class that Sophie found her opportunity to make things right, though she didn't know exactly how. Lily was seated across the room, her usual quiet, focused demeanor unmistakable. Sophie had always admired that about her. It was as if Lily had this unshakable calm, an aura that radiated peace even in the midst of chaos. As the class went on, Sophie watched Lily out of the corner of her eye, her thoughts swirling. She realized she had two options: continue pretending like everything was fine and go back to playing the same old game, or make a change. Sophie didn't have all the answers, but she knew that the first step had to be acknowledging her mistakes. After class ended, Sophie walked up to Lily's desk. She didn't know what she was going to say exactly, but she knew she had to try. "Lily?" Sophie began, her voice hesitating at first. Lily looked up, her warm eyes meeting Sophie's with an expression of genuine curiosity. Sophie felt a lump form in her throat. I've been thinking about everything," Sophie continued, her voice quieter now. About what I said, how I treated you. I've been a terrible person. Lily's gaze softened, her eyes never leaving Sophie's. She didn't respond right away, as if giving Sophie the space to continue. I spent so much time focusing on winning, on being at the top, that I didn't see what really mattered, Sophie said, her voice shaking slightly with the weight of the confession. I thought power, wealth, attention, those were the things that made you someone. But now I see that I was wrong. I don't even know who I am without all of it. Lily said nothing at first, but her eyes reflected something Sophie wasn't expecting, understanding. You don't have to have it all figured out, Lily replied gently, her voice steady. I think the hardest part is just admitting when something's wrong. You're not alone in this, Sophie. Sophie's heart fluttered in her chest, the words both comforting and humbling. She had expected Lily to be cold or distant, but instead, she was offering something Sophie had never expected: compassion. Sophie swallowed hard, her mind racing. I don't know how to fix everything I've done, Sophie said, almost whispering now. But I want to try. I don't want to be the person I've been anymore. I'm sorry. Lily smiled softly, her expression warm. You don't have to be perfect, Sophie. You just have to keep trying. And that's enough. Sophie felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. It wasn't the instant redemption she had hoped for, but it was a start. A small step towards something better, something real. She had spent so much of her life pretending to be someone she wasn't. But now, she felt like she could begin to shed that false persona, bit by bit. In the days that followed, Sophie found herself gravitating toward a quieter, more introspective path. She no longer cared about the superficial trappings of popularity. For the first time, she started to focus on the things that truly mattered: genuine connections, honesty, kindness. She began to sit with Lily more often, sharing lunches and quiet conversations. Sophie still didn't have all the answers, but she found peace in knowing she didn't have to. Lily had taught her that sometimes the best thing you could do was just be. Not to fight for attention, but to simply exist in a way that was true to yourself. And as for Harvard Prep Academy, the school that had once been a stage for Sophie's constant need to prove herself, she started to look at it differently. She still attended the parties, still interacted with her peers, but it was no longer about vying for their approval. It was about enjoying the experience for what it was, connecting with those who truly mattered, and letting go of the toxic pressures she had once embraced. The tipping point came when the school held its annual winter formal. It was an event that had always been about who wore the most expensive dress, or who could attract the most attention. But this year, something was different. Sophie walked into the ballroom with Lily at her side. She had chosen a simple black dress, no flashy accessories, no extravagant display of wealth. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, natural style, and for the first time in ages, she felt like herself. Not the girl she'd been trying to force herself to be, but just Sophie. And as the evening unfolded, she noticed something remarkable. People weren't looking at her the way they used to. They weren't admiring her for her wealth or her status. They were admiring her for her honesty, for her kindness, and for the strength it took to admit her mistakes. Lily, too, was surrounded by students who now saw her for what she truly was, a person of substance. And as the night wore on, Sophie realized that the friendship she had formed with Lily was not just about redemption for her own actions, but about something far more profound. It wasn't about being on top anymore. It was about lifting others up and finding peace within herself. Sophie had been at the top, but it had only brought her emptiness. Now, as she looked around the room, she saw that true strength came not from winning, but from being kind, being real, and being vulnerable enough to show the world who you truly were. And for the first time, Sophie was at peace with herself. Sophie's journey at Harvard Prep Academy had been a battle of pride, insecurity, and the constant need to prove herself to others. But in the end, The real victory came not from achieving fame or wealth, but from the courage to let go of the things that had defined her false sense of identity. Her quest for perfection, for recognition, had left her empty. It wasn't until Sophie encountered Lily Carter, someone who embodied authenticity and grace, that she realized what true strength looked like. Lily, with her quiet humility and genuine kindness, became a mirror for Sophie, reflecting the person she could be if she shed the layers of pretense and simply allowed herself to be real. The path wasn't easy. Sophie stumbled, faltered, and struggled with feelings of jealousy and bitterness. But every step of the way, she learned that growth comes not from climbing over others, but from reaching deep within oneself to find compassion and self-acceptance. In the end, Sophie's journey wasn't just about fixing the wrongs she had done to Lily. It was about fixing herself, about realizing that life is not about winning at all costs, but about the people we become in the process. The true measure of a person is not in their wealth, their status, or how much attention they can command. It's in their ability to be kind, to be real, and to show strength in vulnerability. Sophie's transformation teaches us that the most powerful thing we can do is let go of our need for validation, and instead focus on building authentic connections with those around us. It's not the external accomplishments that matter most, but the internal peace that comes from accepting ourselves, flaws and all. Lily's example showed that genuine kindness and authenticity are far more powerful than any material possession or social position. And Sophie's lesson is that it's never too late to change, to embrace who we truly are, and to stop pretending to be someone we're not. Growth, after all, isn't about perfection. It's about progress. And the journey to self-acceptance begins with the courage to step away from the competition and into the quiet, peaceful strength of simply being yourself. In the end, the greatest gift Sophie received wasn't redemption or forgiveness from others. It was the realization that true strength lies in kindness, authenticity, and living a life that reflects who we truly are. And that is a lesson worth carrying with us, no matter where we are in life. The real victory is being true to yourself and showing others that same kindness along the way. What do you think is the most important lesson from Sophie and Lily's story? Is it about the power of authenticity, overcoming jealousy, or the importance of being kind to others? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please give us a thumbs up and leave a comment with your thoughts. We'd love to hear your opinion. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you relate to the lesson learned in this video? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring story like this. Thanks for watching.